Welcome to Blue Collar Elk Hunting, brought to you by ElkBros.com, with your host and elk hunting coach, Joe Gilliam. You want to hunt elk? They live to hunt elk. Their goal is to share with you what they have learned grinding it out for over 30,000 seasons, doing what they love. So come on into camp and set a spell. Welcome to Blue Collar Elk Hunters.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Joe Gillia, and this is our Insights edition of Blue Collar Elk Hunting, where we want to talk and learn about all things elk. Y'all, on today's special edition, our show title is Seeing Through a Master Elk Hunter's Eyes, with the goal of talking about those things that an experienced elk hunter's eyes sees, takes in, deciphers, or connects to. What do they look for? How they look, situations, locations, sign, terrain, conditions, behaviors, etc. And y'all, I couldn't have found a better person to take us all on this journey than today's guest. How he has any time to hunt is what I want to know. He's a resident of Idaho, known to many as the Bugler. He's been a regular instructor at Dan Staton's Elk Shape camps. He co-hosts, see, there I am, dude, man, my redneck showing up. He co-hosts Meat Eaters Cutting the Distance podcast with buddy Jason Phelps. He's a world champion elk caller. And as far as I'm concerned, from everything that I've got to see, know, and hear from you, you're just a world-class person as well, man. Dirk Durham, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks a lot. Way to put me on the spot here. Build me up, and people are going to be like, oh, once they hear me talk, they'll be kind of let down. Like, that guy has a weird voice.
No, man. Oh, and happy belated birthday.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I've hit the golden years, 50 years old. There you go.
Yeah, I got to comment on the thing, man. I can remember when I turned 50 and everybody, that's supposed to be that one, real milestone. And, you're all trying to take it in and trying to let it go by and everything. And my mom gives me an AARP card for my birthday.
That was really kind of her, wasn't it? Mine will be in the mail any day, I'm sure.
Hey, I don't balk at discounts, dude.
Heck yeah, I'll be getting all the discounts at the restaurants. I can order from the senior meal now, the senior menu now. Man, life is good.
Yeah. Well, you think you can get the senior menu, and then you go, you get those discounts. Then you go in there, and people are like, no, man, you got to at least be 60, right?
Oh, well, that's good. I got a few years left then.
So I turned 62 back in November, so I got you by a few years, man.
Oh wow, yeah.
I'm cranking with it. So thanks for doing this, because, the whole idea of this show, especially with people now, everybody's starting to draw tags. Everybody's starting to, do all the things to get ready for the upcoming season. And it's so funny because I coach and work with hunters all the time. And they work on getting the gear. They work on all these logistics as far as where they're going, and they start to find the spot where they're going to camp. And man, they shoot. They have everything lined out. And then when they get there, or even before they get there, it's like, it's a big shock, man. It's all a shock once they get there. It's a shock even when they start looking at things, online, trying to do their e-scouting, trying to relate this to the reality of when they're out there. And what I wanted to do with you, Dirk, and what I wanted to have this conversation about is, really when we look at things, even like you're on a family vacation, my wife gets so mad at me, man, because, we can just go on a camping trip. And she's like, are you scouting?
Oh, yeah. My wife and I were in Hawaii here a couple years ago on the island of Kauai.
Right.
And as I'm looking there, I'm like, man, if we were on the mainland, I bet there'd be elk right up there in that saddle. She just rolls her eyes at me.
And that's exactly it. Just like what you said, like, there was a unit that we were hunting in, and one of the guys I coached had taken an elk. We went and helped him pack it out. And as we're driving out, I look over and I see a spot and I'm like, they're in there, you know. It's just something that an experienced hunter's eye sees, takes in, and kind of connects to immediately. And I don't know how well we're going to be able to relate this to people, but I'm going to try to do that in different ways. And just so that, it's kind of like if a regular person was to walk through a meadow, you know, they would probably be like, oh, this is really cool. Look at this big, beautiful meadow and look at that beautiful mountain up there. But somebody like yourself walking through that sees so many more things, sees things so differently, looks at things differently. Like you just said about Hawaii,
Right.
one of the things that you connected to was a saddle, right?
Yep.
So, let's kind of talk about how is it and why is it? Do you think a person like yourself, a master elk hunter, sees things differently? How do you see things differently?
I think it's because just all the time in the field spent elk hunting and looking for elk and trying, scouting for elk and just trying to figure out where they live and understand that. So as I'm driving down the highway, I'm always looking. I don't care where I'm at. I'm driving down the highway. I'm like, oh, look at that mountain over there. Oh, that looks pretty good. I wonder if there's any elk there. And man, I bet that little basin up there's got elk. I just immediately start picking these things apart because I have elk on the brain, right?
Right.
I spent 18 years in the tire industry and looking at people's tires day in, day out, right? And to this day, I have this bad habit of looking at people's tires and be like, hey, man, you need to rotate your tires. They're cupping out, or we'll be driving in traffic. I'm like, oh, man, that guy's tire's a little low over there. I'm just always looking at tires. And it's the same thing as elk hunting. It's just whatever you're like immersed into and really, really interested in, I think you're going to look for those things in your surroundings.
Yeah, exactly, man. So let's talk about those things and let's give like different perspectives. And even like I want to go to things even like scenarios, a situational type thing, because I always get scenarios from people that are like, and we're going to get to this in a minute, but I just want you to start chewing on it a little bit because I get things like they're like, well, I had a bull, and he responded and he was within, 200 yards. He was hanging up and I wonder what I could have done differently. When there's just you and I, especially yourself, when you get that, man, right away, all of these questions that are pertinent to that situation, to really define that situation, to really see it in the light that you should, hasn't really been answered. So those are some of the things I want to talk to as well.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
But let's take, like, for example, you say how, and I did the same thing. My wife got so mad, man. We're driving through Washington, going to see Mount St. Helens. We stopped at the edge of the road. I pull out my binos, and I said, "Oh, there they are." And she's like, "What?" And I go, "Oh, the elk." And she's like, "Oh man, only you."
Can't we just enjoy this for what it is?
Yeah.
Oh, there's the elk.
Yeah. And so let's take things like there are going to be people that are going to be e-scouting. Let's go to e-scouting to reality, like regular boots on the ground scouting even before the season. Then we'll kind of talk about some other things like when you e-scout, when you look at an area, what are those things that you're looking to pop out at you in that 2D, even if you can do a 3D environment that gets so flattened out in e-scouting, right?
Right. First off, I'm looking for places that I can actually hunt. So without any issues. So I'm looking for national forest, or state lands and national forest, maybe BLM, depending on where you're located. And in the Northwest or the Western, the Northwestern states, if you're like at a 40,000, 50,000 foot view of Google Earth or OnX or whatever mapping software you're using, a lot of times those places are a lot darker green than other places. So the higher elevations, the mountain ranges, they're going to be a little more darker green. As you exit those mountain ranges, you'll be into like lighter colors. So typically lighter colors to me mean private property or places I'm not going to look for elk. So I key into the dark green first. So then we zoom in, and then I start looking for topography. I start looking for roads, and I'm looking for like long drainages, let's say 5-10 miles long, without roads in them. But for the way I hunt, I'm looking for an area that has enough roads to get me to that drainage, right? So
right,
it's not going to be the area won't be covered in logging roads, let's say, but there'll be some Forest Service roads or some BLM roads, some access roads that'll get me close to those kind of a drainage. But there's no roads within those drainages for quite a while. Now, maybe up on top there might be a road, but it'll be deep. It'll be maybe a mile or two to the bottom of the drainage, and then down to the creek or something. But then from the very beginning of the drainage to where it dumps into another, whether you're dumping into a river or dumping out into the front range, you got lots and lots of miles there. So I'm looking at those kind of places. And then once I kind of see those ridge lines and those drainages that kind of pop out, I start looking for other things. I'm looking for habitat, right? Security, food, shelter, water, all those things. So can the elk feed? Can they have some north faces to bed in the shade when it gets hot? Are there grassy meadows, or are there brush fields? Depending on the kind of country you're in, is kind of what I'm looking at. Now I'm talking about Western states. Now, if you're looking at New Mexico,
there you go. I was just going to, dude. I was getting ready to say, how bad did that mess with you?
Really bad, because it doesn't look anything like that. It's all kind of the same color, So then you're looking for, BLM lands, national forest to hunt. But then what I'm looking for is I'm keying in on all the water tanks, right? So the mapping software that I use on my computer versus my phone, I use OnX. So I will go through and I will zoom in and I'll find every single water tank that I can find on my desktop, because it's a lot easier to do it on my desktop, and I will mark it. They're all marked. Well, a lot of them are marked. So every spring, every water tank, I'm going to mark those with an icon. And then once I get there, boots on the ground, once I get there to hunt, we start checking water tanks. The ones with water, I change the color of the icon to blue. The ones that don't have any water, let's say yellow. Just so at a quick glance, when maybe you're spun out on your day's hunts, you're like, man, where should we go? And it seems like New Mexico is always a water game, right? You're gonna find the water, you're gonna find the elk. So if we're spun out in certain areas, like, man, where should we start tomorrow? Well, there's water tanks over here that we know have water. Let's go there tomorrow. So those are kind of the things I'm looking for, just at the first glances of e-scouting.
Yeah, so let's take, now you have your e-scouting there and you talked about that. And I think, to me, road systems are huge. And not only just for the travel purposes, but especially like two tracks. One of my favorite things to do is when I get there on day one, man, I'm running every doggone two track I can, looking at every crossing, looking at the dirt, trying to look at the mud, anything I can do to, to be able to find activity and tracks that's coming from someplace, right? So,
right.
And and it's funny, you can be in some place if you don't check the road system and you think you're someplace where nobody else is, only to find out that there's a road within a half mile that you didn't even know about, right? So, right. Yeah, I totally get that. And, now that you had that New Mexico experience, because you were down in southern New Mexico, I live up in northern New Mexico.
Okay.
And we have a lot of those same areas, man, that are just rolling ridges and stuff like that. Nothing real deep, but, like you said, everything kind of looks the same. Did your experience, like when you got boots on the ground and you first got there, what was it that your eye and that your head and your senses were looking for? I know you said you started with water, but when you went there, because everybody in southern New Mexico goes and looks for the water,
Sure.
right? And a
Sure.
lot of people are sitting on it, so those animals become nocturnal on those. So
Hmm.
what types of things were you then looking for when you were there in that situation? What was catching your eye at that? Take us through what what was seeing in those eyes that was catching you and that was putting you in the best situation.
Well, just like you, I'm gonna travel the road systems, all the 2 tracks, and get an idea of the area. Look for people. Look for elk sign. Um, One of the first things, no matter where I'm at, that I'm looking for right off the bat is I have a trained eye to look for elk rubs, and I'm always looking for those. And a lot of times you'll find them if elk are, it's not like super wilderness remote places. Elk will travel back and forth across roads all the time. So I'm looking for rubs on either the uphill or the downhill or either side of the road, depending on what the topography looks like. I'm
Right.
also looking for like little trails. A lot of times, if it's steep country, you'll find trails that kind of come off the bank, off the cut bank, and the elk are coming from the top side down to the low bottom side, maybe to get water or vice versa. And I'm looking for those little trails all the time. Just like I'm looking, my head's poked out the window, looking at the downhill side of the roadway. If it's that kind of country, if it's steep country, elk will oftentimes walk on that outside edge on the downhill side of the road. That way, it's easy for them to get away if they encounter trouble. So it's easy to pick out the tracks along the roadway there and also on the cut banks. Now, what'll really foul you up is if the elk are sharing the habitat with domestic cattle.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of young steers. So if there's a bunch of domestic cattle, and you're like, man, I don't know, these could be elk tracks. I immediately start looking for gigantic round footprints. It's like, well, this is old mama cow's track,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
A big bull elk can have a big round track, but nothing in comparison to a big old domestic moo cow or a bull. So I'm trying to verify off of that. So a lot of times elk and cattle will share that same trail. So there'll be some scat, some cow patties, but I'm also looking for elk droppings as well. Looking for those. And then that's just my first glance. I'm covering country. I'm looking for those kind of places. I'm looking for wallows by all those, by any of the water that you may find. Maybe it's a rainy year. Maybe you get there and there's water everywhere. We found wallows right next to the road. Them things are wallow in a mud puddle right next to the road, right in the road.
Yep.
So you're looking at those kind of things like, okay, cattle probably not going to wallow in those kind of places. They're going to walk around and drink and crap all over the place, but they're not going to actually actively like roll around and a lot of times you'll find some rubs by those wallows too. So
Now, some
that's
people won't even like hunt areas if they see cattle because they think that the elk won't hang around where the cattle are. What did you find out?
Oh, that's crazy talk. They'll share that habitat. Growing up, I hunted country, state lands and some private lands as a kid. That elk shared the same habitat with cattle, and they didn't really seem to have a problem cohabitating. In fact, sometimes the way the cattle graze grass down, they'll graze it down and then there'll be a lot of nice green stuff coming back up, especially in September. You get some September rains, and elk love that kind of stuff. Those little green sprouts are coming back up, versus a field that hasn't been grazed by cattle at all. And you'll have waist high grass. Sometimes elk will walk right through that and they'll go right over to where that cattle been grazing too, because there's all that fresh green grass growing those shoots. So
Yeah, great point, man. And I know some people as well, like when you were talking about, the mix up with the size of the print and everything, people that really, even people that have some experience, sometimes the smell of those bovines will fool them to think that there's elk
oh
in
yeah.
the area, they'll kind of confuse that as well, right?
Yeah, for sure. One time I was walking down this road and there was fresh prints in the road, these fresh tracks, and they're elk size. I'm like, man, it looks like a bunch of elk walked down the road here. It looked like, 3 or 4 elk and 3 or 4 cows, and there was a bigger track. Like maybe there's a bull with them. So I'm like, they're right ahead of me, and there was no cow patties whatsoever. So I'm like, I think they're right ahead of me. So I just doubled my efforts and started going pretty hard, and walked about a mile, and start, I'm calling, the whole way, and I get to this bend in the road, and I come around the bend, and they got me good. There's 3 or 4 domestic bovine cattle there stand there looking at me real funny, and whenever I blew my bugle at them, of course they ran off like crazy. But yeah, they got me good because they were that age. Like, man, they really do look like an elk track, and they can fool you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you catch the smell off the water, everything like that, difference in the urine, all those. So, I want to talk about those special features. Like you said, when you're in Hawaii, or you can be driving down the road, or you can be camping. What are those physical features? I even notice, like, I scan areas differently. My eyes look at places differently when I look at a hillside or a ridge or off in a distance. I have a pattern that my eye takes that I finally started to, realize, and talking to people how I do that. But let's talk about you when you're looking. What are those features that catch your eye when you're camping or you're driving down the road, things that mean something to you as an elk hunter?
So a lot of time is that transition breaks in topography. So let's say you have a hillside that's super super steep, whether it's a ridge line, or maybe it's a big steep face, and then as soon as you see like a bench or some kind of a relief in that steepness, it'll transition to like a little bit of maybe a bench or a saddle, or maybe it'll kind of go into a basin or something. Those transition areas are where I'm keyed into looking, because that's where the elk are gonna want to be. They will hang out on that really steep stuff a lot of times, but they like the path of least resistance as well, and especially if during the middays when they're kind of bedding and stuff. So maybe it's just a little knob. Maybe there's a lot of big ridges around, steep ridges, but this one ridge comes up steep, and then there's like a little knob and then a little saddle behind the knob, and then the ridge keeps going up. To me, I feel like right on that little knob would be a great place for a bull to bed with his cows. Very defensible. He can smell, the winds are going to be coming from a few different directions there. He'll have the high ground. He can see, he can hear, he can smell. And then a lot of times you're gonna have a lot of shade there too. And sometimes those little saddles in behind the knob will have a spring or some kind of a wet place there to get water or to wallow. So those are kind of the places I'm looking for. Same thing as like you have a culmination of a bunch of steep faces, a bunch of steep ridges that go up, and then they kind of flatten out and then kind of turn into a basin that it's a lot more gentle country. It's like, well, number one, to get into into that basin, it looks like it'd be very difficult. So especially if there's no horse trails, you can look at your map and be like, okay, there's no horse trails going into that basin. So that's a big green flag for me immediately. So it's not easy to get there. If there's other horse trails around where people can access, and let's say it's a busy trailhead, over a mile or two away from that spot, and it's really difficult to get from where those horse trails are, where the people are normally accessing them. And if you go see that really steep place, in my mind, elk are going to want to go to that place. If it's difficult, people can't walk there very easily, they're probably going to find security there. So they're going to go up there, and then they're going to find everything they need: food, security, shelter. So that's really what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Now, you said in Hawaii, you said saddle. Why? Why did that catch your eye?
Until you someone asks you don't really, it's like, you think about it. But saddles, that's a great place for elk or deer or any kind of animals to travel through the mountains. So you'll have a big mountain, and they may want to get through a saddle they want to get from this side of the mountain to the other side of the mountain. They'll go through that saddle.
Right?
Yeah, path of least resistance. Again, it's an easier place to kind of shortcut, instead of climbing all the way over the top of the mountain, they can hit that little saddle and have an easier time.
Yeah. Now, and I've got to jump back to this because, you know, there's something that you did, man, that it like so impressed me. It gave me so much respect. Look, I have always had a lot of respect for you, Dirk, and just who you are and how you represent yourself. But when you had the injury you did, and you had to learn to shoot your bow with your mouth using one hand,
Oh
basically.
yeah, yeah,
And not only did you learn to shoot the bow, you go out and call in and kill a bull.
yeah.
Exactly that. I mean, it was tremendous. That is the true definition of perseverance and somebody that just won't give up and finding a way.
Right.
Where there's a will, there's a way. But going back to that hunt, there were things that you had to look for specifically because of your situation, because you're going to need some time to do some things differently than before, you know.
Yeah.
Um, Following Dirk and how you see that going through there, what were you looking for? Talk about that hunt and the things that you were looking for and the situations that you were looking for to put you in the best opportunity to be able to kill an elk using a mouth tab with one arm.
Well, first off, you have to be in elk every day as much as you can. And one thing you don't see on the video is how much we changed areas every single day to stay in elk. Um, it's almost embarrassing, but we put almost 2,000 miles on my pickup in
All
10
right?
days, changing areas just to make sure we were into elk. So it's a rather large unit. So you get up super early, long before daylight, drive for hours until you get to where these little pockets of elk could possibly be. Then you hunt there, and if you come up short, I don't stay at those places, beating around, trying to trying to find an elk where I just can't hear one bugle. I immediately leave and we drive to a different location, get out and try to find elk there. That was very key.
Well, what did those
And
pockets look like, though? How did you determine those pockets? Now, I know you have a lot of experience in your home
uh
area, right? And
mhm.
that helps a ton on that. But define what were you looking for to define those pockets
We kind of go just right back to what we talked
just
about
did
before.
before?
Yeah,
Okay.
you're looking at those hillsides, you're looking at those drainages,
Mhm.
you're looking at those places where you think an elk would inhabit, and that particular area, I have a lot of experience with. A lot of history with that
Right,
place, so I kind of knew where I'd heard bugles before in
right.
past years and where I hadn't. So I always hit the places where I had heard bugles in the past.
That
And
that's huge. Yeah.
yes, yeah, that past knowledge.
Mhm,
But being that it's wolf country, um, not a lot of those places that you've had good experiences in the past
mhm.
had bugles in them. A lot of them we'd come up short. So then I would check the places that I've heard bugles in the past first, and then after that, we're trying to play recovery. So then we're checking places we haven't had bugles in the past. And in fact, um, where I killed the bull is a place I've never had a bull answer me ever until that year. Like over the years, I'd bugled into that country a lot and never had a reply.
So when
But
you're bugling into these places, you're trying to get the most efficiency out of your calls that you can. So what type
right.
of situation are you looking for to get that kind of efficiency?
So I like to say I like to pick the low hanging fruit first
Uh-huh.
before I go to the top of the tree, right? So I'll bugle from strategic places next to the road by the truck.
Okay.
On my way, let's say I have a trail picked out. I want to hike out this trail and hunt for the day. But before I ever get there, on the way to that spot, I'm going to check all the boxes before I ever get to that trail. So and I'm the places I select for that are places where my bugle can reach a long ways away. So um, I would say you would park and be able to walk out on a ridge top and bugle off into a drainage over this way, and maybe walk a little ways further and bring bugle in a drainage in a different way. So you kind of be able to cover a lot of ground, where your bugles can maybe carry, a mile, away. You may hear stuff a mile away sometimes, depending on if conditions are right.
Yeah.
But I'm checking those places, and I have to do it. You have to do it with some intent. Like you have to kind of, and there again, recognizing those places. Like I'll be driving along, like, oh man, if I was here in September, I could bugle from right here, and I guarantee you I'd hear an elk, just because the way things look. Now, how things look. Well, let's say over on that hillside, there's a clear cut, or there's maybe it's a big brush field, or it's a big grassy hillside. And then over here, you got dark timber, and then there's some like lots of steep ground, but then there's some nice little saddles over there. Or there's some ridges with that go up steep, and then they kind of bench out a little bit for a ways before they go steep again. All those things I'm looking at, and there's little creeks in the bottoms of these draws or these drainages. So
now we're getting a view.
Yeah.
Good job,
Yeah.
Dirk. That's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
Because now we're getting that vision through your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
You know
Yeah.
exactly what you're like. For me, one of my favorite topography or terrain looks is what I call a crow's foot or a reverse crow's foot. In other words, I've got 3 drainages that are coming down into one drainage. I really like that. Or if you reverse it and you have one drainage coming down that splits off into 3 drainages, because a lot of that happens right there. When you have that one ridge and it splits off, you're going to end up with a lot of that change and flattening out of topography. And you have those heads, and generally drainages mean water. That's how those are created. So you have that, and then you've got a lot of different sides, north, south, east, west. You have a lot of those different textures when you get something like that. So that's one of, like, when I see that, when I'm going and I see one main drainage coming up and this splits off, and then I can see those benches happening up there where those animals could traverse back and forth. To me, that's also a perfect, it's almost like a megaphone type thing to call into, or if it's on the top going into 3, to call from. So, that's one of the things that immediately catches my attention. Or like you said, if I'm going along, and how, gosh, there's an area in Colorado we were driving through, and we're driving along the river, and you have one side of the river, there's all these houses, but on the other side, it's real hard because of the size of the river to get there, and there's no roads. And then you look up, and as you're going, there happens to be, it's leaving from the river kind of flat, but then it's walling up on the sides, and it's going away into a type of drainage with a real strong north face on there with thick timber and water down at the bottom, flattening out at the top where there's feed. So just like you, those things catch my attention as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And if I'm in country that's pretty arid, and they don't, like, if you're in the northwest, Pacific Northwest,
right,
it's timbered on the north, south, east, and west slopes. You got timber everywhere.
Everywhere.
But if you're south from there a ways, you start getting a more arid country, to where, let's say, all the south slopes, there's no trees on it at all. Maybe a little bit of scrub brush, but mostly grass. But then your north faces all have some timber on them, and then some brush and stuff. Immediately that I look at those places. I even pull out my map. If I'm new to an area, let's say we've spun out and we had to relocate, and we're looking at this ridge system, I will take my map, and I'll do an aerial or the satellite imagery, and I start looking at all the north facing pockets. I turn my map to where it's easy to see which way is north, look at all the north facing pockets. Then I turn on the topo layer, and then on those north facing slopes, I'm looking for little benches. And these little benches, a lot of times, are really hard to identify, but it'll be just a slight little squiggle. It won't be that hard line like the rest of the lines. It'll be just a little bit of a more of a squiggle line on your topo lines. And so then I'm looking for that little extra squiggle. So this may be a 50-yard or 100-yard section of ground that's a little flatter than everything else in there. And then I key back in a little closer to the aerial imagery, and I look for the most mature trees in that like spot. So the most oldest growth, the biggest, heaviest trees. And typically that's where those elk are going to bed in the daytime, because they're always going to have shade in those type of spots. So I'll go through and I'll on my phone, and I'll make marks on every single one of those things. And then now it's time to get out of the truck and check them. So then I'm hiking across these hillsides and I'm checking and calling into each one of these things. I'm using the wind, strategically, not to get, I'm not calling to where the elk are going to smell me long before I ever get there. And 8 times out of 10, you're going to find elk in those kind of spots if there's elk in that country. Because especially if it's, you're not starting at daylight, you're starting, let's say you're relocated and it's 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. And typically, if I can hear one bugle at 11 o'clock and get on him by 12 or 1, as long as the wind's good, we're going to call him in and either see him or we may even shoot him. But we're going to have an encounter if we hear a bull bugling in the middle of the day like that, if we can get in there and get tight.
You mean you're not going back to camp at 10 o'clock and catching a nap, getting some breakfast?
Yeah, make some bacon and eggs. Yeah. No, not typically.
It's nice, but man, I tell you, a lot of, because I hear so many people, they talk about how, they get on a bull in the morning and they call to him and the bull's just running away because he's pushing his cows, when really that's not the case. They're all going to bed following the cows.
Mm-hmm.
And most people will think, yeah, well, they're going and they're gone. When they could actually, they're going to bed, they could actually follow those boogers, and you don't have to follow in the rear end. You can just get up on the parallel and just try to get as much as you can where you can hear. Even look on, like you said, your OnX and determine where those bedding areas are that are going to be your best bet within. How far would you say, Dirk? And a lot of times in your situations, through your experiences, once those guys start going to bed, and without something boogering and jumping them, how far do you think they usually go before they find a bedding area?
Well, it just kind of depends regionally, it seems to me. There's like in New Mexico, we would follow bugles from before, like an hour before light. We'd get close to like a tank and listen to the bulls, and then they start leaving, and then you follow in the darkness. They may go 4, 5, 6 miles before they hole up, but they'll travel that pretty quickly, a lot faster than we can. So you just you hear distant bugles as you're trying to keep up. And then you kind of get up there and if you stay on them, stay with them, you can kind of get their closing bell calls, there towards the end. They've hit their spot, they've got to their bedding area, and then, instead of those real full, robust bugles that you heard earlier in the morning, it'll be more of a lazy, moany type bugle. That means, yeah, we're in the bed. We're just gonna let everybody know we're here, but it's bedtime. So New Mexico, it may be 4, 5, 6 miles from where you started them.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think they travel so far?
I don't know. I don't have enough experience in New Mexico to have a good theory on that. I will say too, like in the Pacific Northwest, they may only go half a mile.
Yeah,
they may go a mile.
So thick, yeah.
Yeah, and they have everything at their, they have water, food, shelter, everything right there within 160 acres or 640 acres. I mean, they some of these elk don't even move that far in the morning. Some would surprise you, some on both sides. But one thing that kind of surprised me in New Mexico was I thought, okay, well, I'm going to run my game plan I normally run and get up, let them get in bed and get them situated. I'm going to get up in there and, call them out of the bedding room. Mm-hmm. But because of the type of trees that we were hunting around in New Mexico, all them stupid pinyon pines and junipers. Well, those don't leave a lot of room to like sneak up on elk. Like at your eye level, you don't see nothing, but down at your foot level, if an elk's laying there, they see you coming from half a mile away. Right. So it makes it very difficult. And after you screw that up once or twice, like, okay, I'm going to quit doing that. So then you just kind of wait in the wings. Maybe you put them to bed. You think, okay, well, I'm going to, this evening, I'm gonna hunt them right here once they get out of bed. But the crazy part was they didn't stay bedded all day like the ones up north do. They would bed for an hour or two, And when they get up, a lot of times they'd be quiet. They just sneak off, kind of an Irish goodbye, if you will. They'd get up and just sneak off without saying a word. And all the while you're sitting over there, it's like, oh yeah, yep. Here, as soon as the sun goes down, the shadows get long. We're going to call these elk in. And they're long gone. They gave you the slip, and so it's definitely a different kind of game. So I guess what we found was, when they go to bed like that, if they're not in an area that's like super conducive to getting in tight, like more brushy and some normal pine trees, if some good thick stuff, if we don't have that, then we just watch from a distance, get up high and watch across, and kind of don't take a nap, sit there and eat your lunch, and keep your glasses out and watch and see what happens. And a lot of times those things will get up and kind of move off, and they may not talk again for a while. They may get up and go crazy. It was kind of like day to day. You just never knew what you would get.
Yeah.
But it was interesting.
That's New Mexico. And I think, and that part of it, especially because that's the cool thing about our state, is we have so many different variances. We have parts of our country that you would think you're in Colorado. We have some that you think you're in Arizona. It's just a lot of different type of terrains that offer a lot of different ways to hunt those boogers out there. And I think a lot of it with their bedding has to do with that terrain and with the ease, because they are creatures that don't like to burn, calories if they don't have to. But in some of that country, it's just not hard for them, and in seeking out, especially in some of those areas where there's a lot of roads, you don't know, what else is out there bumping them, or other people that are interacting, or other elk that are interacting that are causing them just to keep moving like that. But it's easy for them, whereas I find that especially like you said, in some of that thicker country where there's only so many great options for them to get that coolness, especially if it's hot, they're really not going to go real far. Now, there's some places where water is, like there's places in New Mexico. I know of one hill in northern New Mexico. It's a mountain that's out there. It's like 6 miles from the nearest water, good water, and the elk travel back and forth from there every day, just to water and go back. So, so that gives me a point, though, to, when you are seeing through your eyes in different areas, what is the first, second, and third on your list between the bedding, the feed, and the water as to the areas that you're going to want to? I mean, when you know where water is, but the elk aren't going to be there, and sometimes they're nocturnal or they travel, how does it look on your list of what's going to be priority for you?
Yeah, unless I'm in New Mexico or maybe somewhere really dry in Colorado that looks like New Mexico, water's usually not on my big list, because everywhere else in the Pacific Northwest, or even Montana and Wyoming, there's little springs and creeks
everywhere.
Enough to where if you wanted to go sit on a water source and think, all right, these elk are going to walk by today, then you may never see one in 10 days, just because they walk by, take a drink, and then they just move on. They can get water just about anywhere. So those kind of places, water's not a big priority. But a lot of times shade is those north facing slopes. That's always seems like a priority, especially during the rut. There's those things are getting hot. They're working hard. They're running around, and they want to take a cool break and nice rest. And it seems like consistently that's what I'm really keying into, is those north facing slopes, to where they can find that shade in the middle of the day. And
especially if you have those benches that do have some kind of spring near that where they can wallow and stuff like that. So, all right, so let's put together the pieces. If you could put together the best piece in an area that you're looking at, how would that look as far as bedding, feed, and water? The type of area that you look at, you go in there and you're like, dang, they're going to be here.
Yeah. Well, a place that they don't have to travel too far for any of it, like, within a mile from the where they feed at night, they grab water on the way to bed, and it's within a mile or less from in a spot like that. Now, one thing people tend to want to key into is like, man, I need to get really far away from the road. I need to get like 10 miles deep. Mm-hmm. And they just like, I got to go hike to the end of the trail, and then that's where they'll be. But a lot of times, then you're competing with horse camps or whatever. Right. And I found sometimes the further away from the road I get, the further away from the elk I get. There seems like there's a happy medium there somewhere between 1 and 3 miles, 3 to 4 miles from the truck is where you're going to find quite a bit of elk too. And some people will just hike right past them. They'll just throw their bow on their pack and get them moving and walk right past them. So there again, low hanging fruit. Pick that low hanging fruit as you can. Let's say you do want to go 10 miles. Cool, but don't forget to hunt along the way. Make your calls, do some glassing, look for sign, pay attention. There could be elk very close by, especially if it's not like a big crowded trailhead. There's places you get out of the truck, and before I even take a whiz, I'll get out and bugle right from the truck. I'm like, oh yeah, there's an elk right there, and there's a trail I could have walked 6 miles on, but they're right there. So you never know where they will turn up.
Right. Okay. So let's start talking about how you see things experience wise. And, there's a lot of people that always ask the question, start low or start high, when they're actually out there and they're actually on the hunt. Should I be down in the bottom where the elk are going to be in the morning, or should I be up high, where the elk are going to? Myself, I don't really have a set rule on that. I usually play the cards that I'm given at the time.
Right.
Because you can find yourself in each situation. But you're on that ridge in the morning because you're doing that bugling, and you get one that's down there. Let's say that it's gray light. You actually, it's just right before gray light. You're on top of a ridge. You get some bugles down in the bottom of a drainage down in there. What's your general play? Are you bailing? Are you, what is your play on something like that? How do you see things there?
First and foremost, I'm thinking about the wind and where my location, where I'm at right this second, is going to affect the elk that I hear. Are they directly below me in my wind trail, or are there some decent like finger ridges off this big ridge line that, like, say, if I walk straight down, I'll be on a separate finger ridge than where the elk are at, which is ideal. So if I hear the elk down in the hole, I'm going to walk down a ridge that's not within their scent trail and try to get on their same level before I start actually trying to engage them.
If you like what you hear or see, you can get all of this information plus so much more from our base camp elk hunting training camp. This course will be like nothing you have ever experienced in concept and structure, using success-based coaching techniques that will elevate your confidence and skill sets, allowing you to see, visualize, understand, and relate every coaching point to what lies ahead, the next step, the next thought process, the next success. So if you are looking for that one thing to help you fill that tag this year, invest in the most important piece of equipment there is, you and your elk hunting knowledge. You can find the Blue Collar Elk Hunting Academy and the Base Camp Training Camp at ElkBros.com. That's ElkBros.com. Keep dreaming of the screaming, believing in achieving, and most of all, keep grinding.
Same thing with starting in the bottom though. Start hunting from the bottom. Trying to get calls. Depending on the country too is different. But if it's really steep, deep country, calling from the bottom is tough. Just because you don't. Sometimes that big steep face right off from the creek, the first 500 feet or 1,000 feet, you're just calling onto that face, and a lot of times the elk are not on that face. They're as that face transitions and rolls over, they're up on top of that. So a lot of times you can't even hear them from down the bottom. Another thing is if you wanted to travel that drainage, you would, and if you walk up the bottom, there's way more in and out little features, little crevices and pockets that you're going to have to traverse to cover that whole drainage. Whereas if you're on top of the ridge, there's less
Smaller
walking.
on top.
Yeah, it's smaller on the top, and it's just more efficient. So I like to be up high, but I'm not going to overlook anything down low. So if it makes sense to do a bunch of calling on the bottom, I'm going to do it. A lot of times in the bottom, so it's tough. There's rivers, there's little creeks that
Right.
make noise, and you're like, man, I just know I could hear an elk up on that hillside if stupid creek wasn't making noise. So these are some factors. And so sometimes if it's a deal like that, maybe I'll climb up high from that spot. I see a spot that looks, oh yeah, you can see a bench up there. It looks real good. Well, we just got to climb up there and test it and check it. But as far as the winds go, yeah, I'm going to be super smart. And people will kind of say, oh, you guys call too much. You guys are just calling. If you were to watch me hunt from the other side of the drainage and you're just watching like, man, look at that guy. He's just walking all over he's bugling all over the place. God, just shut up. There ain't nothing answering. Well, number one, the guy on the other side may not be able to hear what you hear. Number two, it's just like a guy working a trout stream. I'm just not walking along bugling indiscriminately. I'm bugling very calculated. I'm taking apart piece by piece of the topography. I want to call into each little pocket, each little finger ridge, and if it's if the large ridge is a narrow ridge, I'll work one side for a little bit and then I'll walk across because I'm watching my map the whole time. I'm looking for those little benches and pockets on both sides of this big ridge to cast my lure into, to call into. I don't know how many times you call, you don't hear nothing. You walk 100 yards and it opens up the topography more.
Yep.
And you call there and bam, immediately you hear a bull that you couldn't hear before. He
Right.
might have heard you and he might have answered, but you couldn't hear him. And just walking 100 yards will make all the difference. So if I got to bugle every 100 yards because the topography makes sense, I'm going to do that. Sometimes it just doesn't. It's more big open country with less little terrain features below. Maybe I'll walk a quarter mile before I bugle again. You can kind of almost tell by the echo and the feedback you're getting from your bugle. If you're getting a lot of echoes and you hear a lot of feedback, just like, man, it really sounds like my bugles are permeating. But if it's big country and you bugle and there's not a lot of echoes, it may not be penetrating as far as you want it to. So you really have to, cast your line or cast your bugles down in each little pocket.
Yeah, and even if you are, if you're having difficulty, determining that, picking up their bugle in that same situation, you're just not going to hear it. And
Right.
Where you talked about, like, you're on one side of the ridge and you go over on the other side, I think a big mistake that a lot of people make as well is the same thing as fishing a stream. How many times somebody go through working water and they're like, well, there's no fish in here, I've already tried it, and they move up, and then somebody else comes through in the same place you just fished and bam, they catch one out of there. And
Yeah.
just because you worked one side and you went over to the other side does not mean you cannot go back, because a lot of times those animals that either weren't responding or they were responding by moving into you or they were calling or using a type of call, whether depending on type of season, it might have been a low, vocalization that you didn't hear, when they
Right.
responded. But you go back, man, and it's had some time for them to do things that they do in elk time. Now you go back over there and you give a call, and boom, all of a sudden that dude's right on top of you because he was moving in the whole time, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I think a lot of times we don't we expect things in people time instead of elk time, and we don't give a chance for some of that to marinate a little bit and then really to find out if there's something that's happening there, right?
Yeah.
How did you handle that in New Mexico? Because I know, and it happens up there in Idaho too, man, where it's just early season, and I know you guys hit this for a while, because you get out there and you're doing your thing and you're doing all this, but they're just not responding back verbally, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how did you see that now? What is next for you? When you see that it's early season, let's say it's the 1st through the 5th. And a lot of times, and I'll tell you this, for us, and I don't know if it happens up with you, like the
Mhm.
first and second, there's usually something blowing up on the 1st and 2nd.
Yeah.
There's like this real early rut that's blowing up. And
Mhm.
then like the 3rd and 4th, everything goes quiet, right?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. I see that a lot. There's that little lull period, like the starting gate of season. Like the first few days, you'll like, wow, this is going to be a great year. And then like the second or third day, it's just like nothing. And I don't know if those bulls were just getting excited, like we were, like, all right, we're going to bugle, or maybe they caught a cow that was in heat early,
Right.
but a lot of times it seems like I'm finding bulls that want to answer to bugles more to bugles and less cow calls during that first couple days. Like they're still trying to figure out a little pecking order stuff maybe, and you're taking advantage of that, and then they kind of shut up.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's weird that way. And so when we run into that, we just can't buy a bugle. It's almost like back what you said, like on elk time.
Mhm.
I know there's elk here. There's fresh tracks. There's rubs. There's scat. They're here. They're just being stubborn. They're not talking for whatever reason. They don't want to talk. They hear us. They just don't want to reply. Well, let's just let it marinate. Let's go somewhere else. We'll come back here in a couple days. And I've done that a lot over the years, whether it's New Mexico or Idaho or Wyoming or whatever. So, they're there. Just don't push it too hard. If you start like digging in, if I like to kind of hunt the fringe before I dig in, and if there's nothing talking at all in the fringe, and if it's early in the hunt, and I'm
What do you
not on
mean,
like
friend? Dirk?
desperation,
Explain that for us.
so the edge, so I'm not, let's say I'm on top of that ridge and I'm bugling down into these pockets, down into these finger ridges where there's like places where the elk would bed.
Mhm.
If it's early in the hunt and I haven't heard any bugles down in those little places where I think I should hear them bugle,
Mhm.
I'm probably not going to just dig in and go root them out.
I see.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to foul it up too soon. I'm going to let them marinate. Like I'll come back in a couple days. Maybe they'll be ready to talk then. But if it's towards the last 3 or 4 days of the hunt, now we're in desperation mode. Now we got to get in. We got to get our hands dirty. We got to get in there and hike down into them places and just like go walk through every nook and cranny and bugle, bugle, bugle. Just try every little nook and cranny down in the where you think those elk are at. And so instead of like from the sidelines calling into the where the elk live, or they're going to spend most of their time, now we're down in where they spend most of their time mixing them up. So.
How many times do you find yourself, though, think about it over the years, when you're having your most encounters, it's like at the beginning when you're doing it, it seems like we're real soft gloved a lot of times.
Mhm.
And then we get to that like last 2 days. And so we're like going for broke. I mean, if you think about it over the years, how many times have most of your encounters happened when you were in desperation mode?
Oh yeah, quite a few. And that's leaving no stone unturned, right? So
Right.
you get out of the truck and it's like a vision quest mindset, right? You're gonna win no matter what. So you're gonna hike every little pocket that you think an elk would live, and you're gonna bugle down. You're gonna get down in where they live and turn something up. And if you hunt a huge area, you can do that on the daily. If they're not answering, you can be like, okay, well I think there's elk down there. Let's go dig them out. You could do that. But if you're limited on how big of an area you can hunt,
Right.
maybe you have to kind of start off a little easier and do it. Let's say you're Colorado and you're backpacked in. You just got to kind of like, well, I want to spend a few days in here. We don't want to like blast through here right off the bat. Let's kind of like ease our way in and figure these elk out and then hunt them. I think that would probably be how I'd play that.
Yeah, the problem for us in a lot of like in our state, I'm not sure how big the unit was that you were in there, but a lot of times we can end up in units here. You can have one unit that can be 200,000 acres. You can be in another unit that's like 40,000 acres,
Right.
and you're if it was just me in that unit, and nobody else, then, it's a lot of times. So if there's a lot of people, sometimes I got to be more aggressive just because, other people are going to blow it up if, I don't get myself in a situation. So
Right.
yeah, it makes it. Whereas in Colorado, man, it's kind of cool. It's like what you said. You can put 2,000 miles on going to different places because those are places that you can go to that you know of. But
Mhm.
when you're, I guess that, that's one thing people got to consider is what do you have available? And according to how much you have available and how much, pressure is already there and how many people are in there might determine really how quick you take the gloves off and get into it, really get into it, and it's really made me a little ultra aggressive over the years just because again, in a lot of those situations I found where some of my best activity was going because I almost went to, that aggressive, desperate mode. And it seems like, man, how many times have I killed bulls on the last day, because,
Right.
because I changed that whole, temperament and stuff.
Sure.
So let's take that, how you see it in a situation, man. So, you know, it's going to differ. And I want to know, like, when you're in that window, when you're in that window from the 1st to the 10th, and then you have that window from the 10th to the let's say to the 20th, and then from the 20th to the 30th. I kind of broke it down into,
Mhm.
kind of threes right there. You know, how you see, you know, an animal, a bull, when he responds, you already feel something about that animal because of time of year, either that first third, middle third, or that last third. Do you
Mhm.
see him differently, or is it just all about that response? And when I say that response, how do you view that response as being the one where I'm going to kill this bull, right?
Yeah. Um, it's all about the response and how he responds, what it sounds like. So, what did he respond to first? So, to me, trying to get an elk to bugle is like an experiment every time. I'm going to experiment with what sounds I
Mhm.
can get a response out of. So, I'll start out with maybe just a light locator bugle and a couple cow calls. But I'm listening. Like, did the bull answer right away? Well, what did he answer? Did he answer my cow calls or did he answer my bugle? Did he or did he not answer for a while? And when I bugled and grunted or chuckled, did he answer that? Or did he answer whenever I made a great big nasty lip ball bugle and lots of real aggressive, thunderous chuckles or
Okay,
grunts?
so how are each of those different? What do they mean to you?
More intensity. I feel like if it's just a locator bugle, just a that's kind of a non-aggressive bugle, just saying, hey, I'm over here, I'm an elk. Anybody else around? When you take it up a notch, it's sounds a little more aggressive. I'll put a little more emotion into the gravel, the low part, and then I'll hit that high note, and then I'll give some grunts or chuckles. That kind of escalates just the mood. I feel like it escalates the temperature sound of the elk. And if I don't get a response from that, then that lip ball bugle. So that lip ball bugle, it's very aggressive, really nasty sounding. Now, why is that? Why would that? Why would a bull answer that? Well, um, he may not have answered before, but all of a sudden, you've kind of painted a picture in his mind's eye. You did some cow calls early, then you bugled, then you did some more cow calls, then your bugle escalate a little bit more. You did some more cow calls, and now you do a lip ball. He's like, wow, there may be a cow in heat up there. You're painting and this is what I think in my head. And who knows what an elk's really thinking, but and I'm trying to get in his mind's eye that I'm a bull that found some cows, and I've been farting around here with them for a little bit, and there's a cow that's in heat, and now I'm excited about it. And depending on whatever triggered that bull to bugle is kind of how I'm going to play it after that, and what his bugle sounds like. If he gives me this moany bugle, I'm probably not going to get super aggressive with that bull right off the bat. If I have a bull that sounds very aggressive and like really interested, I'll probably keep the intensity to where and it seems like they almost answer with the same intensity that you are, right? A lot of times, if you just do that moany or that kind of a locator bugle that's non-aggressive, you may get one that sounds just like it, or like a notch or two below, just something that just kind of a non-aggressive bugle. So, and then if, let's say you fire up with a more aggressive one, man, the bull may answer with a very aggressive bugle. So I want to try to kind of call to his temperament or call to his disposition, whatever the kind of sounds once he vocalizes, I want to kind of try to call to that same intensity myself. So, and maybe even just a little bit below it. I want to let things build up, right? We don't want to just crank the knob to level 10 right off the bat. Let's slowly work this up. And it seems like it works better when you can kind of like work them up a bit before you're like at level 10.
8 o'clock in the morning, lights already up, and you're on the side of the edge and he's on the side of the edge, possibly going to a bedding area. Are you able to make a play? Do you see this as a killable bull to you?
Oh yeah, there's always a chance. It's just like Dumb and Dumber. So you're saying there's a chance, like 1 in a million. But no, and I think you just have to play it right. Like, especially in that early season, I feel like I've done better if I was saying before, just kind of slowly work them, slowly let things build. So I'm going to just talk to him like, hey, I'm another elk over here. Hey, man. And then like slowly, every time he vocalizes, I do this one thing where once I hear a bull bugle, then as soon as I bugle again, I'll set my timer on my phone and I'll time it and see how long it takes for him to respond. So let's say he only responds every 3 minutes, every 5 minutes, which seems like an eternity once you've heard one bugle. It's like, oh man, is he ever going to answer again? And you're like, maybe I should test it. No, we're gonna try. We're gonna watch my phone here, and then 3 minutes goes by, and you're like, 3 minutes? That felt like an hour.
Yeah, right.
But if he starts timing it, and let's say it's every 5 minutes, maybe he'll answer. So I don't try to rush things. Like if it took him 3 minutes to answer, then I'm going to wait 3 minutes to call again. Now this isn't a perfect science and it don't work every time,
No,
but I've done this, and this is just like for reference of how often maybe you should call when you're trying to slowly work one up.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll do the same. So I'm going to wait 3 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever it was. And then if he keeps talking, pretty soon that it seems like that time starts to decrease in between responses. He'll instead of 3 minutes, he'll reply after 2 minutes, and after 2 minutes, after a minute, and pretty soon you can start hearing a different tone in his reply. Instead of that friendly, hey, how you doing, non-aggressive location type bugle, he starting to put a little more emphasis, a little more attitude in his bugle. And when they start putting a little bit of attitude in their bugle, I'm going to put just a little bit of attitude in my bugle. But I'll almost do just copycat.
Right.
I feel like it'd be the same as like if you were trying to be passive aggressive and start a fight with someone. Mm-hmm. You don't really just walk up and say, hey, you're a lying, cheating jerk, right to somebody's face. You sit back and you just like say little things, little snide remarks that are just like kind of passive aggressive, to where pretty soon the other person that starts picking up like, hey, this guy's not a friend to me. He's not trying to be nice at all. And I don't really like what he said. And pretty soon maybe you say something back like, hey, nice pants, dude, or whatever. As men, we get this, right? Because we've probably all been around somebody that's tried to start crap with us over the years. And eventually, if you want to start something with somebody, you can peck at them long enough to where finally you'll crack that nut. They'll be like, hey, they'll get mad. They will get mad and they'll show they will get mad. And I think elk are kind of the same way. If you kind of peck at him long enough, if he'll keep talking, you can peck at him long enough. And with elk, I don't want to be 500-600 yards away from this elk, right?
Right.
I want to be a couple hundred yards or less, if I can. I want him to feel comfortable. I don't want to climb right up into his face right off the bat, but I want to be close enough to where it's annoying. And once he starts becoming a little more aggressive and having a little more attitude in his bugle, then I'm going to start escalating my attitude a little bit. And pretty soon, and this may take an hour sometimes, pretty soon he may just like give a really mean bugle, like, hey, like you finally have cracked the nut. You've insulted him or you've made him mad. And you're like, I got him now. And it's no different. You got his goat. Just like if you're trying to start a fight with another man, you got their goat. Now somebody could come in swinging, maybe not, but I think
shut up, boss. When
if they shut up?
Yeah, when you're in that 200 yards, man, and that magic hour hits, and they just
yeah.
What do you see in that?
Sometimes if they just clam up on me, I'll clam up too. And a lot of times, now it can go either way. A lot of times after a while, they're like, where'd that bull go?
Yeah.
They will break the silence. Like
yes.
It starts bugging them. Like, where did he go? Is he still over there? And if you let him bugle and then wait, don't reply. Well, make him, he'll bugle again, and probably a lot quicker than it took him to break the silence the first time. You're still on his mind, and then I'll start playing the game again. But I feel like sometimes just when they clam up, if I clam up, that's a good way to get inside their head too, because they will break the silence again, especially if they're on that 100, 200 yards away. They get like, where is that thing? They get a little bit paranoid. Is he sneaking in over here?
They're a lot like we are. I mean, the whole reason that we call is because we're not sure where that elk is. We want some reassurance that they're still there, that we can go to them. So what do? We put a call in the air. And they do the same thing, man. If they're wanting to know if there's other elk out there and that they're there, they're going to, they're going to throw a call out there, man. If you're the one that's calling constantly and you're mute, they can just listen to where you're at and peg exactly where you're going,
Right.
They might even come into you silently. You don't even know that that's happening. But it's the same thing. If you shut up on them, and they want to know where you're at, they're going to say, hey, hello, right?
Yeah. And at that point, if I'm 200 yards away and he breaks the silence, I may cut the distance. I may stay quiet. I'm going to cut the distance and get over there close. Okay. I know right where he's at still. He's still right there. I'm going to get over quite a bit closer, and then I'm going to call again. And at that point, especially if it's early season, they don't have cows yet. These bulls have these little hidey holes, or these little bull bedrooms or whatever they hang out in, and they're pretty defensible of their space. It's like they don't want you coming and getting in their little zone and their little bubble until it's time to go rut, right? They've all kind of separated. They're not buddies anymore. They've been over there rubbing their horns and like
territorial at that point.
Yeah, they're getting kind of territorial. And I think once you kind of break that circle there, get into that little circle, then here they come. And a lot of times I won't even have them give me that really big, nasty, aggressive scream, that big challenge type bugle where you're like, whoa, man, he's mad. He's coming. Sometimes they'll escalate to a certain point, but it won't go beyond that. But pretty soon you watch and here they come. They're like curious, like, who is this wiseacre over here messing around my spot? I don't recognize his bugle, and he's really ticking me off. I don't want him to come over in my spot. I don't want him laying in my bed. And a lot of times they'll come right in.
So I want to ask you this, from somebody like you, why is in any situation when you're out there, when you hear an animal or when you think you have one that, responds, why is time of day and time of year so important to you? Or is it?
Time of day is important because, like, if you're hearing the bulls at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, typically they're on the move from where they fed to where they're going to bed. And a lot of people will say, oh yeah, I just, I called and they just moved off. And what am I doing wrong? What did I do wrong? I must have made the wrong call. It's like, no, they have their day. They're just like us. They have their days planned out already. They're going over here and they're going to talk to you. And if you want to come, you can, but if you just kind of give up and say, oh, it ain't working, then you just immediately lose. But that middle of the day, if I can get a bull to call in the middle of the day, I love that, just because I know most of the time he's not on the move. He's in his bedding area, especially if he has cows. The cows are in probably a pretty good spot for him to defend, and he's going to be defensive in that spot. He doesn't want you to come in there and mess up his little perfect world. So yeah, I always say it's almost like having a crackhead on the sidewalk outside your house, right? You're not going to let that guy enter the lawn, right? You don't want him making it at the front door. So you're going to catch him at the sidewalk. You don't want that bull doesn't want another bull making it into the bedroom with all those cows, because that's going to screw his day up. There'll be cows running around everywhere. Now he's got to fight, and he may lose half the cows, but if he can stop you before you get into that bedding area, if he can get you at the fringe of that bedding area, like within 100 yards of that bedding area, then he can do his fight and do his dirt, chase you off, and he's good. So I think that midday is real. I love it. And people talk about moon phase, full moon. Midday seems to work better on a full moon for me.
Absolutely, because they're bedded so much longer, right? Because they were up all night long. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've had bulls and cows go to bed at first light. They'll be in their bed at just like 30 minutes after the first light, and then you'll hear a few moaning bugles and then nothing. But by noon, that bull's got an itch. He's a lot of times the cows will get up and feed around close by to the bedding area in that midday. And a lot of times he'll get up and walk around checking cows, rubbing his antlers. Maybe he wants to go over that little seep that's close by and get a drink or wallow. But if you can be there, especially on that full moon, he's going to be more active in that midday, to even like that early evening time. As soon as those shadows get long, he's going to be moving around a lot more.
So I want to go through your eyes in this sense. You have a bull that you've spotted that's coming into you. You can see him. You're in your setup, whether you're down, whether you're up. You're ready. You've got arrow nocked, and you've spotted that bull coming. And as soon as you've spotted that bull coming, what is now happening? What is happening through your eyes? What's happening in your head? What's the thinking to get ready to close that deal?
At that point, it's hide and seek time. I'm going to hide, and he's going to have to come find me. I'm not going to continue to call. Once I can see that he's coming, maybe you can visually see him, and you can see him coming. He's licking his lips, and you're like, oh yeah, he's committed.
Yeah, you've seen maybe that tongue hitting the nose coming, right?
Oh yeah, yep. And then, or let's say maybe it's really thick, dense woods, but he gave that really aggressive, I'm going to come kill you bugle, and you hear sticks popping. I don't make another call at that point, and then I'm looking around. But before I've even get to that point where I'm standing, I've already looked around at my feet, and I've cleared out my feet. I've got all the pine cones and little sticks. And if I've had quite a bit of time, I may even make myself a little pathway so I can walk quickly, like take 3 steps. If he comes this way, I can shoot. I can take 3 or 4 steps over this way and not step on crunchy stuff. Mm-hmm. I've done that a lot. That's the last thing you want to do is have to reposition when they come in and take one little step, or you have to transfer your weight just because you're tired of standing on one foot for 30 minutes. But clear your feet out. And then I've always, the first time, as soon as I get set up there, I want to range. I'm pulling out my rangefinder and I range everything. First thing, I knock an arrow, range everything. And during the scenario, I may even range again, and I may range again, and just reassure myself on refresh.
Yeah, you're 50 now, man. You got to make sure, right? So
yeah, exactly. I'm slipping. Old age got me, but then I'm just looking at where they possibly could come in. So he's coming. Now I'm going to, ready for the shot. I'm not going to focus on antlers. As soon as I seen antlers, oh, he's got antlers. I want to shoot that elk. It's a legal elk, or that's big enough elk, whatever I've determined. Mm-hmm. I made that decision. I quit thinking about antlers, and I solely start thinking about his path, where I'm going to draw my bow, and where I'm going to shoot him, like on arrow placement, shot placement. And I'm focusing on that shot placement. But I'm also going through this little shot process in my head of how I'm holding my bow. I want to draw my bow without torquing it. I want to put my string on my nose. I want to look through my peep sight. I want to find my sights. I want to find my bubble and make sure the bubble's level. Then, I'm going to get back and find that elk, find the spot on the elk, and then, wait for the right time. But I'm not going to draw the bow too soon. I want to draw my bow at the last opportunity I have to draw it.
What do you mean by that?
Well, oftentimes people will, they draw their bow in the first opportunity they have to draw. So they see, let's say the bull's at 40 yards coming and they see antlers or they see something and they're like, oh, here he comes, draw my bow. A lot of times, especially at that 40 to 50 yard mark, they'll get to that 40 or 50 yard mark. You draw your bow and then they stop and then they scan. They're looking for that other bull. Well, now here I am. I can't call. I can't bugle behind me. I can't do anything but hold this bow and not let him see me shaking because he stood there for 3 minutes and I can't hold my bow back anymore. So I avoid that. I kind of expect that. I kind of expect the bull to come in and hang up for a moment or longer. But right before he comes into the shooting lanes, I think I can get a shot. I'm looking for those places where, okay, that's the last tree that he'll have his eye behind when I draw my bow. Now, one thing you have to be cognizant of is if you're wearing a backpack, he goes behind that tree, especially if he's not like right next to the tree. Let's say he's 38 yards beyond the tree. You're going to have a very short window to draw your bow. And if I've seen y'all draw your bows. A lot of people arch their back. They do some movement of their body besides just one slow fluid motion of pulling their, I mean, I even do it, right? So if you move your body, he may catch the movement of your pack moving and you'll miss get in the shot. He'll lock up or spook. So keep that in mind. And if you can, pull your pack off. It's a lot more liberating to be able to shoot without a pack on, if you can. I mean, be prepared to shoot either way with or without the pack. Practice that in the off season. But that's one of those things that'll get you there right at crunch time, is getting the bull seeing your pack wiggle when you draw your bow. But so that's what's going through my head. I immediately identify that I want to shoot him and then focus on where I'm going to shoot him, where I'm going to draw my bow. Because if you wait till that last moment to where, okay, this is probably the last place I'm going to be able to draw my bow, you're going to get that bow back and you don't have to hold it very long. All he's got to do is take one more step. And sometimes that's easier said than done, right? They sometimes lock up there too.
We all know. Yeah.
But at least he's very close. And if you have to hold your bow for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, you're still probably going to have a good opportunity to shoot him, at 20 yards or 15 yards, or whatever it is.
Yeah. How many times, Dirk, have you ever had in that situation when the bull does catch that last movement of the draw or catch the movement of the pack, and he just stops and looks and stares at you with the tree in his kill zone?
It's happened before, and or they just kind of see, they'll like look at me like, wait, is that a guy standing there? You can kind of they'll just burn a hole right through you. Yeah. And I've had it where they'll just stare for a while, like a long time. And then they'll kind of blink. You can kind of see their face go passive and they just keep walking. They start walking again. Or sometimes they become more alert and their ears get more in tune. Their ears would come forward, their eyes get bigger, and their body, their neck starts getting taller, and the gig's up. They're gonna bolt.
Yeah, you just gave a great description, and one thing we talk about is behaviors of animals, and a lot of people are wondering, when is that bull going to bolt like that? And that's a great description there. Even sometimes they'll urinate before they're getting ready to take off too. So yeah, no, that's super. I see. I've shot instinctive almost my entire life, except for the last 2 years. That's a whole different story. But so with the bow that I used, because I wanted the string to come out of my fingers, it didn't have quite the let off everybody else is. So I had to always draw in that last, in the last seconds. And I can't tell you how many times that, early in my career, I tried doing the whole tree eye thing, and every time they would catch the end and they'd stop and look at me. And I figured out that elk have a fatal flaw. And the first one is that if they're going to stop and look at something, they're going to do it broadside. Even like
Yeah.
if they're running away and I cow call and they stop, they're going to stop, turn broadside, and give me that shot again, maybe another 20 yards later. But
Right.
I came down to basically the fact that I'm going to draw on that bull when the kill is in the open, because if he's going to stop and look at me, by the time he gets it going in his head, arrow is sent, right? So
Yep.
I do that now. I wait till my kill's in the open before I draw. And then if he stops and looks at me, and a lot of times I'll use a cow call. I might even use a low bugle or something like that, just to, and I'll tell you the low bugle because in Colorado 2 years ago, I bugled and he was a small, younger class bull, and I bugled when I drew, and his eyes got that big and it just turned him inside out, where I've had big mature bulls, when I do that, they just stop and look at me, and I'm popping them before they even make a decision. Or if they do booger because they saw the movement and they heard the bull, again, they go out 10, 12, 15 yards and they stop and turn broadside. So that whole when to draw thing is huge. I mean, I think that separates a lot of almost stories to, from the ones that, they closed it out, right?
Right. Right.
That's a tough
And,
one.
and if you watch a lot of YouTube, you can watch, there's tons of elk hunting on YouTube, and
Mhm.
you can watch the folks that they draw too soon.
Mhm.
I'll be watching it, and here comes the elk, and I see the guy put tension on the string. I'm like, no, don't draw your bow yet. and sure enough, like the very first moment he can draw his bow, he'll draw the bow, and I'm like, oh no, that's not going to work. And then yep, bull stops, and like, no, you got to let him, like, the last ditch effort time, the last opportunity I'm gonna have to draw my bow is when I'm going to draw it. I feel like I've done way more successful draws and shoots when I do
Right.
that. And then also, like, something to practice in the off season is drawing your bow with no body movement and drawing it so slow it's not really discernible. Because if you picture yourself as the elk looking at you drawing your bow. If you've already got your bow up in place and you're not putting your bow in the air, you just have it right you point it at the elk like you're going to shoot it. And
Hard
you
to
just
see that movement. Mhm.
It is. Your elbow's going to move. Your limbs are going to fold back real slow. It's going to be something that's not nearly as easy to see as like somebody arching their back or
Right.
pointing their bow up to the sky or something. So, and that there again, I don't think I need an 80-pound draw weight bow to kill elk. I like a 60 to 65-pound one that I can draw easily, one that I can hold for a really long time in case that bull does stop. And he's not quite where I want to get my shot. And I have a longer draw length, so I'm blessed with that to where I can get the right speed that I want out of my bow. It's not super fast, but it works. It works well. So yeah, that's where I'm at on that.
Yeah, I think it was a great point that you brought up earlier, though, that through your eyes, when you see those horns, and this is a huge point that I think people need to realize, is that expect a stop and scan. When that bull goes into the area where he should see, or he thinks he should see another animal, he is
Mhm.
going to stop and he is going to look, and before he even starts to move forward after that, so.
Yeah.
That's a great point that you bring up there. And I think a lot of people, when they see the horns coming, they just expect that animal's going to come the whole way. And, you know, 9 times out of 10, he's going to stop and scan.
Yeah. And a lot of people, depend on what camp you're on as far as shot placement. Some people are big frontal people and others are not. But I typically pass on a frontal unless it's like the most perfect shot in the world. But by doing that, you really get to see that behavior, because a lot of times they'll come in frontal, they'll stop. And I don't know how many times I've heard guys say, yeah, well, he come in, he stopped, and that's the only shot he gave me was a frontal. But I'm like, man, if you just wait, as long as if you see his face and he's not alert, he's not like seeing you, he's scanning for that other bull, he'll stop and scan for a second. And if you're not moving, he's going to blink a couple times and then just keep coming. And a lot of times at that point, they'll get that quartering, or they'll get broadside, because they know that other bull's somewhere close, and now they want to make themselves look big. They want to show their self from the side. I don't know how many times I've had it work out well that way.
Right. No, absolutely, man. And even if, we had a standoff with Gilbert, and the bull came up over the top, did just that. He stopped and scanned. All we could see was, the head where he's doing that stop and scan. Well, they're just like us. They can only see a certain amount of level of the terrain. So he's got to keep coming further and raise up. So he comes up over top, and he is standing frontal in front of us at 35 yards for 8 minutes. And
oh, yeah.
At that point, he's looking and doesn't see what he wants. You can tell he's a little bit kind of nervous. He can hear other animals on each side like that. And I know it's a dead bull at that point, because either he's going to keep coming through the trees, or he's going to get bored and turn to go back the way he came, pretty much.
Yep.
So in order to do that, he has to turn. They just don't turn on a dime. And as soon as that bull turned to go away, all I did was bugle. He turns his head, and that's a dead bull because he's broadside. So yeah, like you said, just some patience there and knowing what that animal's going to do, right?
Right.
So I'm going to throw an interesting loop into this before we get out of here, because, when we tried to set this up, you were going on a turkey hunt, and
oh, yeah.
I think you and Jason were going out with a lot of other fellas like that, right?
Yep.
So, and yeah, I can hear friends of mine going, it's not the same. But in a lot of ways, how much of your elk tactics do you apply to your turkey hunting, or vice versa?
It's very similar in a lot of ways. You're on turkey time,
Yeah.
right? We talked about elk time, being on elk time, like you're on turkey time as well. And depending on the birds, depends on how you hunt them. Like eastern birds, you almost hunt those like deer. You set up and you try to get on the lines that they're going to cross. Let's say they want to go from the feeding to the area, or from the roosting area, wherever they're trying to be. You want to be on their pathway and then try to call them and get them within range along that pathway. These ones we hunt here in the West, we got Miriams and Rios and cross between those. Those things are more like elk hunting, because those things hit the ground in the morning and they may cover 10 miles. The crazy birds will move. They're always moving. They'll peck a little bit, and they'll eat a little bit of stuff, and then pretty soon they go right up a steep face. And so you're putting on a lot of miles. And if you're not hearing gobbles, it's just like elk hunting. You got to cover the miles. You got to start walking until you hear one. And you never know what they're going to respond to. There again, maybe they respond to a diaphragm yelping. Maybe you got to get out the old box call. Maybe you have to use a pop call. Maybe you have to use a locator, like a hawk scream or an owl scream, or a pileated woodpecker or something like that. Some kind of a noise to give them a shot, to get them to shock gobble.
Yeah.
And then you got to get close. You can't, oh, we heard one, he's 200 yards away, let's call him in. No, you got to get over there and try to get in his bubble, without getting seen. It's the same thing. And then I will say, I think turkeys test my patience, like sitting in patiently. They test that more than elk do. I feel like elk are going to commit or they're not, or at least maybe sometimes they're vocal enough. Some of the turkeys, they'll kind of get quiet on you, and you may sit there for an hour and think, I don't know, did that thing leave? Did he not leave? And I got quiet too. And you think, all right, well, I'll play this game just like you do with elk. and then nothing. And then maybe you get up and cluck a little bit and bam, he's right there. Maybe he's just been strutting around where you couldn't see him for an hour. Whereas elk, I feel like it's a little bit different. I feel like elk commit a little quicker maybe than a turkey does. But maybe not. Sometimes turkeys just come running right in like they have no brains in their head. Sometimes elk do the same thing. So there's a lot of similarities. You'll go out, you can't buy a gobble from a turkey. You can go out and not buy a bugle from a bull. And you're like, what? This is the third week of September. They should be bugling on their own. The moon is right. Everything, the weather, it's cool. Like you factor in all this stuff in your head. Like, why aren't the elk bugling? It's the same with turkeys. Like everything is like the timing, the time of day, the whatever. It's like sometimes they just don't play the game like you want them to play it.
Yeah, that's hunting, man. And that's why I've been curious too, because I know how effective decoys are with turkeys. I also know how effective they are with elk, but it seems like a lot of people haven't figured that part and that connection out because anything, both of them confirm visually,
Right.
So I have you used any decoys at all?
A little bit, but a lot of the country I hunt is thick enough to where if
true.
that elk can see it, he's already in range.
Yeah, right.
So like he won't be able to see it at 60, 80 yards. He'll be able to see it at 30. And then by then I'm like, I don't want to mess around with this decoy. But if I were to hunt some open country where they can, look from 100 yards and, I would definitely consider it. Yeah, I think it would, and I know people that have done it, used them effectively in those kind of situations. It seems like the guys that use them, they don't just stake them out on a hillside and be like, all right, come to Papa.
Yeah.
It seems like maybe they show it a little bit and then hide it, show it a little bit and hide it and give a little mystery, that way the elk can't just immediately look over there and like, that's a phony looking elk. That's not a real elk. They see movement. They see that look like an elk and then, okay, I better come check it out.
Yeah. When guiding, I would just show part of the rump of one, just kind of move from behind a pine tree and pull them by. But, personally, I use the Ultimate Predator mounted to the front of my bow. And that has been a game changer, man. That, the one thing that I didn't like about decoys was the whole setting up, taking down, and that whole process there. And this eliminates that and gives me, it's been very, very effective. We've had some funny things that have happened like that, but that's a whole different podcast, man. I tell you, Dirk, I think this has been super because we have actually gone from beginning to end. Before we've even entered the woods to closing the deal on the end. And, for people to hear a lot of things, there were a lot of cool nuggets that came out of this. And for them to hear it from somebody that has as much experience as yourself, one thing that they have to deal with that is a little bit different is that you are an expert caller and have been doing it for a long time. And I would, you'd be the first one to tell people they don't have to be expert callers,
right?
But they really do need to call, right?
Right. Yeah. You don't have to sound like a world champion elk caller, but what you do have to sound like is an elk.
Right.
And there's some elk that sound pretty weird, but it has to kind of sound authentic. It has to sound elky. And every year you'll be out in the woods and you'll be like, good Lord, that call sounds terrible. Like that hunter sounds terrible. It doesn't sound anything like a real elk. It just doesn't. The cadence is wrong. The construction of how the bugle is articulated is wrong. But if you can, I'll use the example. When my brother and I first started elk hunting, then I took off really quick on elk calling. I got pretty good pretty quick. He struggled with it. And I always say he sounded kind of like somebody stepped on a rabbit and then kicked their chihuahua or something, like the way he sounded. It just sounded god awful. But he would kind of present it with such enthusiasm and it was at the right cadence and everything. But the sound just wasn't the picturesque, the perfect 3-note bugle, right? But man, he would do that and bulls would just get wound up. He would make them mad and they would come into it. So I think it's just like, putting out that emotion into it. and and having it sound not perfect, but it sounds the resemblance of an elk call and of an elk bugle. I think it works good. And I think one thing too people kind of overplay is cow calls sometimes, especially if you're hunting areas where there's lots of hunters.
Mhm.
I think elk key into that real quick because that's an easy one to call. Everybody can make an elk call, or maybe they grab a hoochie mama, and it's easy to make that call. But if it's overused and there's a lot of people in the area, elk will key into that pretty quick. So how do you want to be different than other people? Well, if these elk have been spooked, had some close encounters and spooked by somebody using a cow call, maybe stay away from the cow calls. Maybe go more bugles. Maybe everybody's ripping big bugles and nobody's making really good sound, sweet sounding cow calls, real quiet ones. Maybe that's what you got to do.
Yeah, that rhythm, volume, cadence, all
Mhm.
those types of things, right?
Yeah. I have some friends that they're very successful elk hunters, and they don't hit that high pitch ringing note on their bugles most of the time. It's more of a low moaning bugle all the time. And I have a buddy that stood side by side with these guys one day, and he bugled. He's real excellent caller. He bugled down in this canyon, nothing. And this guy gets out he's got this Frankenstein bugle. Looks like he's glued some pipes and some hoses and some water bottles and stuff together. And he gets out this bugle, and it almost sounds like a wolf howl. This weird low moany bugle. Bam! Immediately, bull answers. So just because you don't sound like the picture perfect elk bugle, quintessential elk bugle that you've heard time and time again on YouTube or wherever,
Yeah.
don't get discouraged. Just practice making some bugles that sound like have some of the construction of a real live elk, but some of them calls that you pick up and you spend about 15 minutes trying to use, those aren't the ones that are going to probably call your elk in for you.
No,
They just
I
don't
hear
sound
you.
right.
Awesome, man. Now, this has been just great, Dirk, and we've tried for a while to connect. I'm so glad
Yeah.
we finally got to, man. I appreciate you taking time out of your day. There's so much here for people to connect to. You actually, and I mentioned it, you and Jason, you guys co-host your own podcast for
Yep.
Media. You want to tell everybody where they can find that?
Yeah, it's an all podcast platforms called Cutting the Distance. And if you want to find me on social media, it's The Bugler, one word, on Instagram, Facebook, and on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel. Same thing, The Bugler. It's just one word. And if you want to practice, you want to learn how to call better, I have a whole calling series on from picking out diaphragms to making the very first sounds, and then right on up to making the most complicated, more complicated bugles, cow calls, grunts, all that. It's about a 5-part video series. So if you're looking to learn how to call, or maybe just kind of polish things up a little bit, it's definitely worth a watch.
And where do they find that series?
It's on my YouTube channel. Yep, The
Oh,
Bugler.
awesome. So
Yep.
they can view all that for free then.
Yep, that's for free. Yep. And if you want to watch me shoot that elk with a mouth tab, and I'll tell you, if you want to get some little nuggets, is watch that whole series. I think there's 10 videos, that mouth tab madness series on my YouTube channel. There's lots of little things, little takeaways, and I kind of walk you through as I'm hunting. I'll kind of talk about what I did right, what I did wrong. But if you just want to skip to the end and watch episode 10 and watch me waylay a bull with my mouth tab, that's cool too.
It's so cool, man. And actually, I did watch the series and I watched what you went through to get there at that point. And I had to, man, I think I sent you a message that right after I got done, finished watching it, because I was just incredibly proud of you and had so much respect for that whole process, that whole journey. That right there is the epitome to me of a hunter that goes out, has a goal, and accomplishes it. And not everything always gets to end that way. And like you said, we don't get to see all of the miles and all the work in between. And most videos
Right.
don't see that. But you know, I tell you, I just know the little bit of work that I got to put in just to be ready every year, and to have been in that situation, bud, and to do what you did, you know, tip of my hat to you, Dirk, man. That is just awesome. And I think all you guys that are out there, either watching or listening, this is, you know, Dirk's also a fun person to talk to. If you want to check out some other podcasts that he's been on, Jim Huntsman, the Western Huntsman podcast. Jim is a good friend of yours, and you guys have done some great things on that show as well, with your alter ego. That is so much fun to listen
to. Oh yeah.
And coming from the South, man, I've got a few of that, some of that alter ego myself. So I really enjoyed it, man. That's a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun.
So thanks a lot, Dirk, man. Appreciate it. And everybody else out there, hey, you guys, you just keep believing and achieving, dreaming of the screaming, but most of all, keep grinding. We'll see you next time. Thanks. Thanks, Dirk.
Thanks everybody.